This podcast is sponsored by Murgitroyd, intellectual property attorneys. For more information on today's guest and our company, visit murgitroyd.com/podcasts.
Welcome to the third season of Murgitroyd's Innovation Talks podcasts. We're delighted you've joined us. If you have any questions, please get in touch by email at innovation.talks@murgitroyd.com or via @Murgitroyd on Twitter. Don't forget to subscribe to make sure you don't miss any future episodes. So let's go straight into today's podcast.
Hello there, I'm Catherine Bonner. I'm Director Patents here in Murgitroyd's Southampton office, and I'm joined today by Rebecca Dobson, Senior Trademark Attorney here at Murgitroyd's Southampton office.
Hi, Catherine.
Really good to sit down with you, Rebecca. Today we're going to talk about a topic that often appears scary initially, but we're going to talk about how to make sure you don't copy someone's IP, someone's intellectual property. I think as a trademark attorney, Rebecca, also advising on designs, that you must have had this type of question and this material come across your desk. Am I right?
Number of times we have people phoning us up. They've had a very horrible letter. In legalese, we call them letters before action, or cease and desist letters in old terminology. They're very, very horrible letters to receive. As a business owner, they can be very nasty, they can be accusative, they can be aggressive, they can tell you that you've been infringing somebody's rights for a very long time, they can demand damages and costs and all sorts of things, and they have some very nasty terms and bits that are hard to understand at the end that talk about civil procedure rules, and if you don't respond within 14 days, there's going to be a court action on your desk and all this kind of thing. Now, they are intentionally written to be scary, but a lot of the times they can be resolved in one way or another. So our first message to anybody whenever we have anything like this is, first of all, please do not panic. Please do not take this letter literally, personally, or anything else. Just pick up the phone to us when you receive it, and preferably well before the deadline that is written on that letter, so we can start looking at the case that you've got and see what the appropriate action is. Now, yes, sometimes they threaten a lot of things. In many, many cases, those are actually irrelevant and it won't end up in a court case. I can honestly say in 12 years in IP that with dealing with these letters from pretty much day one, I have never had a case go to court. Touch wood, I don't want that to happen now, but it is actually very rare to happen. And there are usually plenty of routes to resolve it without having to end up at the courtroom door.
Timing is of the essence, though. It's really, really important, isn't it, that we see these matters as soon as our clients have seen them, isn't it? The delay is not advisable at all.
It's very... and we're all guilty of it. When something horrible hits your desk, the first thing you want to do is bury your head and pretend it's not there, but it doesn't actually help anybody or anything. So absolutely right, time is of the essence, mostly because we need to actually look at the merits of the case. So we need to look at what they're alleging you've done and actually see whether it's true or not. In many of the cases, it's actually not, and it's a chance to clarify. So in some of these instances, it's a route to enable two parties that have existed using the same mark, potentially even in the same field, for a considerable amount of time. And this gives an opportunity to actually hammer out some kind of agreement between the parties to say that we will use it in relation to this widget and you will use it in relation to that widget. Both parties are very happy with that going forward.
Trademark terms, you would often refer to them as coexistence agreements. In patent terms or design terms, we talk about a cross-license. As you say, there are solutions and ways out.
Absolutely, absolutely. And sometimes it's a clarification of the situation to point out that infringement hasn't occurred for whatever defence is applicable. And sometimes it is as simple as pointing out that you have coexisted or that you've got no intention of coming any closer to their marketplace, which is beneficial to both parties, because at the end of the day, everybody wants their marketplace clear for their brand and their product, and that's what we're trying to do. So yes, it may feel very scary when it first hits your desk, but absolutely get on the phone as quickly as possible to us so we can start looking at how to sort that out and put the merits of the case together to see whether there's a route forward and a way to resolve it for both parties. But the key bit of this is also, and the lessons to learn for the future, is actually to keep an awareness of The other uses of, in my case, trademarks and logos and brands, in your case, patents, and for both of us, designs, to be aware of what is out there to stop it happening again. And you have plenty of experience of dealing with that instance.
Yes, Rebecca, yes. You are right. If you can avoid infringing or copying someone else's intellectual property and avoid that letter on your desk, that's always going to be preferable. There are numerous resources available that we can assist business owners and entrepreneurs to map out the landscape of existing intellectual property that they are moving into if they're going ahead with a new project or a new design or concept. These are often freely available resources. I've carried out a number of seminars of sort of intellectual property education for clients, so that they themselves can search existing databases for patents, patent applications and designs and trademarks, of course, that you're aware of. And it's really important that you know who your competitors are, know which fields they're active in, know the intellectual property rights that they have in force currently, so that you can avoid treading on other people's toes, really. For patents and patent applications, we would often advise a prior art search. So that's to look for prior published documents that already exist and are already out there before launching a product or before starting on a new route or new design. The searching that can be done can also be incredibly helpful to understand what your competitors are doing. You might not be in a particular area that they're in, but you might still want to see what they are protecting in that area. We call that patent landscaping or trademark landscaping.
Many of the rest of us just see it in the tabloids as to the latest thing that Apple have launched or something like that from the latest patent application. But it's in a more commercial sense, it's absolutely, patent landscaping is a smarter form of terminology.
Absolutely. Intellectual property resources, I can probably give a list of a few. It may sound obvious, but the business owner or the entrepreneur should have their own intellectual property portfolio prepared so that they know what they have. Secondly, you might want to start looking for intellectual property owned by your main competitors, or you might want to look per subject matter area. Journal articles or trade press articles can also be incredibly useful. And if you're setting out on a new project or a new area or doing some first research, then published patent applications or published patents can be an incredibly useful research tool. You can look at them and later see whether they are in force, whether you would be infringing on those rights. But just to do research, you can see what's already out there and published. So there's no point reinventing the wheel. You might as well see what's there and use the information that you have as if it were a library resource in a way. Really important to use that information and not to come unstuck later. So for a new brand or a new logo, this type of searching will be available in the trademark field as well.
In a similar vein, there are some publicly available databases that cover registrations for the majority of jurisdictions, not all, so they're not 100% reliable, but they're a good start. And then we have trademark clearance searches, which can cover jurisdictions in more detail, a lot more reliable. So we always advise people to have a look at those. And equally, we can do applicant watches, so you can actually see, again, what your competitor's up to, see if there's a particular family of products that they're potentially launching or a new suffix or something that they're going to start using, can be a good indicator. And all the things that you mentioned of keeping an eye on your relevant industry publications, that kind of thing. And good old Google is always a useful tool to make sure that some things, not only the identical marks are coming up, but also confusingly similar. So the most important thing for trademarks is that it's not just identical things, identical marks and identical goods and services, but also it's similar ones that could lead to confusion in the customer. So important to bear that in mind on the trademark front.
So you could fall foul of somebody else's trademark rights, even though you're not identical to those trademarks, just by being similar. The trademark owner could be close enough to them that you could be deemed to infringe or copy their intellectual property rights, their trademark rights, yes?
Absolutely. Unfortunately, trademark and a bit of design work as well is a subjective decision. And what people are trying to avoid is what we term a likelihood of confusion or a likelihood of an association, where the average consumer would seem that there was a link between those two uses of the mark. After all, a trademark is, by its very definition, is supposed to indicate the origin of those goods and services. So it's in everybody's interests that they have a clear space in the market. Nobody wants that confusion because it's not beneficial to either party. So trying to find that mark, these launch searches and actually being aware of what your competitor's up to is vital, not only to ensure that you've got a clear market space, but also that you're not going to get that horrible letter on your desk. So it's, as you say, knowing what your IP rights are is also incredibly important to be able to make sure that you are not treading on people's toes and it's a safe marketplace.
Yeah, absolutely. All of this searching and research is important, and we have advised many clients on it, both from your point of view, trademarks, and I've done for designs and patent applications as well. Thank you, Rebecca. It's been great to hear about that, and we look forward to helping people in the future.
Thanks for your time today. We hope you found today's podcast valuable. And don't forget to subscribe to make sure you don't miss any of our future episodes. So until the next time, goodbye.
Our business is founded on trust and collaboration. The subjects we choose for our podcasts are topical and informative. We are always looking for suggestions for new topics for discussion, so if there's an area of IP that you're keen to understand better, please drop us a line at innovation.talks@murgitroyd.com.